First thing we do, I just want to get all this junk out of this car because it smells like the All Blacks change room at Eden Park after a hard game against the Wallabies. Not that they often have a hard game against the Wallabies, but let's get all this stuff out. I'll take this home and we'll give it a good steam clean. Okay, seats. Oh yeah, they weren't even mounted properly. I mean, this stuff looks pretty terrible now, but when we give it a really good clean, and leather conditioner, you know, a really good clean first, I mean, yuck. You never know. Classic. 2 kilos of 1980 CD Stacker Kenwood. Look, it's a nice unit. It won't be going back in. That might actually come good. It's the old Japanese currency, 10 yen, about 8 cents. Now, next thing I've noticed, this is the battery. The spare tyre's gone. You're not going to use that old space saver. No one's ever, in a million years, no one's ever used one of those. But the battery box here, somebody in their wisdom, this takes a really big battery. It takes this whole space. And at some point, somebody's come along and gone, oh, I haven't got one of those. The battery's flat. Shit, they're expensive. But I've got 50 old car batteries sitting at home, so I'll just use one of these. Oh, it's way too small. Why don't I put it in there and fabricate this steel frame for no particular reason instead? Why wouldn't you just wedge it in with a block of wood either side? I'm not sure. So they've decided to be professional, fabricated this steel frame, put it in here. So and the problem with that is twofold. Firstly, at some later date, somebody's going to come along and want to put a standard battery back in, buy one, and it won't go in because they've riveted in this whole steel section to make it smaller. Second problem is, of course, that it's a smaller battery and it doesn't service the needs of the car. It needs to be the big battery for a reason. Huge amount of electronics in this car. Battery at the back, starter up the front, long leads. You need a high-capacity battery. But there's a third problem as well. Where they fabricated this, instead of having the very well shielded lead, there's only a couple of mil here between the positive 12 volt and the chassis that they've now fabricated here. That could easily short with a bit of movement if the battery moves back this way. Can you imagine that? We got this thing earthed right here. We got a solid to earth right here from the positive. This thing will weld itself into place straight away, create a fire, and the fuel tank's right next to it in the back here. So to me, that looks like pretty poor engineering. We're still going to need to retain 12 volt battery power because we've got all the ancillary systems we're going to keep running. Headlights, wipers, indicators, you know, all those functions. Electric windows, electric seats, we need all that stuff. So we do need 12 volts to work. But, no, don't like that. Okay, let's look at the 12 volt wiring. Now, this is very typical stereo installation, as you'll find. Mess by there. It's going to be a pleasure to get rid of all that stuff. But in case you didn't know, in these cars, under the footwell on the passenger side, it's like NASA mission control under here. Check that out for a fuse board. And yes, timber, 5-ply plywood is standard. First thing I found was half the stuff in the car doesn't work, so what I did was I pulled out all the fuses one by one, and they were very, very dirty. The ends were all corroded and white, so I've cleaned them all up, put them back in, just so we can see what works and what doesn't. Looks better already, doesn't it? What do you mean, no? Okay, so battery's attached. Ooh, that's a good sign. The needle's jumped, so something's working. Oh, very, very faintly. But it's normal to have very, very faint lights because the earths on the dash are all terrible by now. Horn. Nope. Electric seats. Yes. Blinkers. No. Can you hear that? Relay's going mad. Okay, no blinkers. So let's just see what our latent current draws if we just connect the battery. Okay, before I cleaned all the fuses and relays, we had current draw of about 100 milliamps, but now they're all cleaned up. We've got a latent draw of just under an amp. So there's quite a lot of stuff leaking to earth that shouldn't be, I would suggest. There's a lot more tidy up to be done. Next stop, immobiliser. Because cars of this era often had an immobiliser. They were valuable cars and people needed to fit an immobiliser. So somewhere in the dash, and with a bit of a hunt we found it, is this old guy here. auto watch security. Now they put it inside a security case so you can't tamper with it. For inertial sensors and motion detection and interlocks and all sorts of stuff, but all that's completely irrelevant because all it does is it sits deep under there and it just taps into the back of the ignition barrel. So here's the back of the ignition switch, taps into 3 wires, and all you have to do is reattach those 3 wires and you bypass the whole thing. This is not meant to be an exercise in teaching you how to break into cars, but it just shows that these things were over-engineered in some ways and yet fairly easily defeated in other ways. So we'll get rid of all that. And this is going straight in the... It might even crank now. We're not going to start it, but we just want to see if it'll crank. It's all just way too flaky under there. There are way too many things that are leaking to earth or just not connected properly. So anything that's not necessary for fuel, spark, just to get the motor in a position where it could be fired up, is going to go. The stereo, all this stuff, there are nasty leaks. And just sticking around in under there, I fired up by accident the SSPU, the Smells and Smoke Production Unit. Smelt bad, things started to get a bit hot, so we don't want that. However, the good news, but we do have spark, and looking down the bores, we put a bit of oil down them, and they're actually looking pretty good and nicely lubricated. And watch, now I've bypassed the whole immobiliser thing. We're not sending fuel, that's disconnected, but watch this. Very, very free. Turns over really well, so that is a good sign. Now normally these are all broken, but I'm glad to say it's in good condition. It should just, with a bit of luck, yep. Okay. It's good, and that should come out too, carefully. That'll clean up. I think our philosophy with this car is going to be make it work and then make it pretty. Before we can make it work, we've got to make it tidy. So we've got to get rid of all the stuff we don't need and all the stuff that's had it. And behind here, you wait till you see this. So much of these cars was done by hand. Just so you can see how annoying it is back here. When you have cars that are virtually hand built, you end up with, wiring like this. Little fuse way back here, undocumented. Who knows what it's for? Later cars have got fuel and ignition computers here, but this car's an early one with mechanical fuel injection, so it doesn't have one. Relatively basic, but if you can call this basic. So here's another part of the alarm. Protector page, an automatic pager. So that'll come out as well. A power wire to the battery to trigger some relay over here permanently without the relay in place. Also a bad idea. I think that's the electric windows relay that they've tried to bypass, probably because one's failed. For the sake of simplicity, lose all this non-essential stuff. Now check this out. This was once foam, and now, look at that. Now you see it, and now you don't. So this is the blinker relay, and it all looks pretty good. It looks nice and clean inside. Contacts don't look corroded at all. You could test it like that, but this is an electrolytic capacitor on the side, and that's what's used to do the timing circuit to make the blinkers go on and off, and it's just going, oh. So almost certainly this capacitor has given up. You could find out what it is and replace it, but that's typical. They get tired with age, and it's probably just had it, but far easier. Let's just get a new one, hey? Okay. Next step, let's pull the plugs out. Yep. Yeah, not bad. Seen worse. Yep, that's 6. I'll give you a tip. You can squeeze your hand through here, but don't do it because you won't be able to get it out. How do I know this? Don't ask. It's easy to get to it if you come around the back there. There we go. That's number 7. As plugs go, they're relatively easy to get to, especially when compared with a 911. Number 1. Number 2. Yep. Number 4. Number 3. There they go. I wonder if I can sell them on eBay. If you're wondering why I'm dressed like this, it's about 95 degrees out there for you Fahrenheit people, or mid-30s, so it's getting a bit hot and I'm getting a bit burnt, so I thought it'd rather be sweaty than burnt. Oh. Looking better already, isn't it? Look how tidy that is now. Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Looking beautiful, mate. Top of the line Kenwood in its day. Pretty good. Did quite a nice job on the wiring though. I've seen a lot worse than that. Now this is actually the vacuum adjuster for the headlights. So that's vacuum. That probably stopped working about a week after the car was delivered. Really complicated system using vacuum going forward. But this is what you hate to see. I mean, look at this. Wire wrapped, and then, I mean, just look, this, it just falls off it. Suddenly you've exposed just wrapped wires. And that kind of thing with the chassis right there. And these are power. This is power to the power seat to adjust it. Non-standard, been cut and retrimmed. All these potential short circuits right here. We have to spend a few days just sorting this out. All this has to go because it's just bad news. Haven't taken this wheel off yet. First time. Don't you hate it when you get a car and you discover lock nuts, but no lock nut key? Oh my God. However, under the seat, ta-da! How can that be? It's dust. Just completely gone. Well, before they rusted to pieces, they had decent meat on them. And the pads. Nah. Look at that. I just don't understand. This car was driven and parked, and 20 years later, it's got no bushes in it. They've just completely turned into dry powder. Just like that foam in the dash. And check for metal fatigue. I mean, look at that, backing plate. It's really bizarre how much fatigue there is. Oh yeah, roll bar bushes too. Hey mate.
Yeah.
How would you explain this?
Yep.
This backing plate on the brakes. It's like tissue paper.
Yeah, it's that. Oh.
Look, I can tear. It's aluminium, and I can tear it with my fingers.
It's nothing left of it, is there?
It's light.
Yeah.
As we want light for our nice light electric car.
That's it.
But I should not be able to take aluminium.
No.
And tear it like that.
That's it.
Yeah. There's nothing left of those bushes.
Left, yeah.
So what do we need in here? Obviously, rotors, pads, all these control arm bushes. We'll have to clean these control arms up just to see if they're usable.
Yeah.
So we need to sandblast them or something, or soda blast them. Sway bar, drop link bush, sway bar bush, anything made of rubber basically.
Pretty much.
The car supposedly had 20,000 miles.
Wow.
But it obviously doesn't.
Yeah.
Mind you, mileage doesn't cause corrosion like that.
Yeah.
It's been parked by the seaside for 20 years. And yet I've got 3 other cars just as old or older, and their bushes are fine. Okay. I don't think there's any point. I'll put that wheel back on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't have a bad day yesterday. I achieved quite a lot, I think. Electric windows. This one was completely welded on. It had just sealed itself, so I had to break all the seal, take the door skin off, get to the motor, fix that up, and just like I bought one. You know, you can't make a reliable electric car if it's based on existing electrics that are just so dodgy. So we've just got to remove anything that we don't need and redo or repair anything we do. Just But we do have the basics working. Look, we've got headlights. There they go. We haven't got blinkers. Ignition on. That relay's still cactus. Need a new one of those. But we have got dash lights. Look at that. Look, both electric seats. All functions. Central locking works. Watch. We're making progress, guys. This is good. I put a lot of lubrication down on the clutch master cylinder there, but no, that does not look promising, does it? So if you look down at the relay board, now I've worked my magic on it, how many relays are missing? We've lost all the things we don't need, like the rear windscreen heater and the rear wiper and masses of stuff. Sunroof as well. I don't want to open that because it'll never get closed again. So yeah, I'm really pleased. Yesterday was actually a good day. A lot of things I really didn't expect to work are now working. But one of the things that would have been nice to have that we no longer have is the air conditioning fan, the HVAC. So, but look, we're going to change all that anyway. There's no way I was going to trust the old air conditioning in this revamped electric car. So we'll do a fully electric air conditioner. We might be using this fascia and this knob. The slider in there gets corroded, and I'm sure it is. But the fan motor itself was dragging massive current, so it's obviously seized. So we taken out the relay for that. We won't be using that. And the good news is my latent current draw's gone down to almost nothing, about 100 milliamps. So we fixed a few problems. The wiring is still really dodgy, and I don't like it, but we'll fix it all. But we'll get there. I mean, I still hate this kind of thing. Look at this. You know, unacceptable. You know what's next? Let's see if we can fire the engine up. I mean, look how good that oil is. That looks just perfect. But we're not going to risk it. We'll change it. So the goal is not to keep the motor, it's to sell it. But to do so, it would really help if we could prove it was running and in good condition and idling nicely and not running hot and all that kind of stuff. Change the oil, change the filter, do a compression test. Obviously we've got to check the timing belt as well. Change the coolant, and then we'll rig up a dedicated fuel rig so that we don't have to use any of the existing fuel lines and fuel filter and pump and so on. We'll just get a dedicated rig at about 40 psi going straight to the fuel distributor head. We know we've got spark, we know it cranks nicely. We'll put the plugs back in and see if we can get the thing to cough. We can't drive it because we've got no clutch and God knows what's going on from behind the flex plate back, but wouldn't that be an achievement? Next stop, fire it up. So here's the main fuel line in and return, or the other way around. I'm not sure. We'll figure it out. The problem's likely to be in this mechanical fuel injection distributor head. The slightest bit of moisture or corrosion in there and the thing's just seize. And if so, that's the biggest likely hurdle to the thing running. And that's not the kind of thing we can do ourselves. That needs specialists to revamp that. So hopefully this guy will work. Zeroed. This is really interesting. We're still drawing current from something. I've taken every fuse out and we're still drawing 160 milliamps. There should be nothing drawing at all really now. So whatever's sucking current is not going through the fuse board. We've got some earth leakage somewhere. You know, I'm suspecting the next likely source is the high current stuff that goes from the battery straight forward to the starter motor, because that can get oil soaked and it runs very close to the chassis and there are no fuses. So it's a major cause of fires in these old cars. Thankfully, new electric cars are not going to have a starter motor and old-fashioned wiring loom like that. They'll have all brand new bright orange 400 volt cabling. Still a long way off, but we'll get there. In the meantime, these guys can go back. Well, that was a bit disappointing, wasn't it? I guess two things come out of all of that. If you're going to buy an old barn find 928 to restore, make sure it is a barn find and not one that's been sitting beside the ocean for 20 years. Cannot believe how much degradation there was on all those, not just the metal bits, but the rubber as well. So clearly I'm going to have to spend an awful lot of money on every corner, fixing all those brakes, hubs, suspension, bushes, shock absorbers, everything that's had it. But the good news is, at the end of the day, it'll be a great rolling shell, it'll be a brand new car, and that'll be a much better base to start with for the electric 928. The second thing is that by the time a car like this is 40 years old, it will have passed through many, many hands. And somewhere along the way, there'll be a guy who just can't resist tinkering with it and doing things like his wire wrap electrics and stuff. So I've obviously created some work for myself there in fixing that. And in case you're wondering what I'm in today, it's an MG4 in sport mode. And it gets up and goes. When you're stuck behind the world's slowest Camry? Well, it's been a big couple of days and we've achieved not very much, I think. But the next episode, we do achieve quite a bit. So you might want to subscribe if you're enjoying the 928 content. Hey, we'll see you next time.